Okay, let's unpack this. It feels like just yesterday, things seemed, well, if not exactly warm, at least pretty functional between, two enormous figures, former President Trump and Elon Musk.
Right. There was definitely a period of cooperation, seemed like it anyway.
And then boom,
Yeah.
it's like a switch flipped. Suddenly, this huge, very public fight erupts, mostly playing out on social media for everyone to see.
It was really sudden, wasn't it? Commentators were definitely scrambling. We saw it described in the sources we looked at as everything from a high-stakes breakup to just an all-out brawl.
Yeah, brawl feels about right sometimes. The speed of that shift from looking like allies to, well, it's pretty jarring.
Absolutely.
And that's what we're digging into today. We've gathered a whole lot of source material transcripts from news shows, analysis pieces, commentary, all trying to figure out what on earth is going on with this clash.
Right. And our mission here is to sift through all that, pull out the key details, the different perspectives, and basically give you the clearest possible picture of this whole feud.
Exactly. I want you to understand, what the sources say triggered it, the timeline, the impact, which is significant on business and markets, and how everyone else is reacting. Basically a shortcut to getting up to speed.
Sounds good. So where do we start? Before the fireworks, what did that relationship actually look like according to the sources?
Good question. Because it wasn't always like this. The sources definitely point to a more positive recent past.
Yeah, they do. Musk even had a role in the administration, right? Heading up that DOGE thing, Department of Government Efficiency.
DOGE, yeah, sounds efficient. The goal, as reported, was tackling government waste, fraud, abuse, stuff like that.
And there were some big claims floating around about potential savings from that effort. Numbers like $150 billion, even up to $500 billion were mentioned in some reports.
Though some sources did pump the brakes on those higher numbers, questioning the accuracy.
Right, a bit of uncertainty there. But the intent seemed clear, improving efficiency.
And the optics were strong, too. Sources talked about that moment with Trump showing off a red Tesla on the White House lawn.
Oh, yeah, I remember seeing that. And didn't he give Musk a ceremonial key to the White House or something?
Exactly. Those images definitely projected, partnership, alliance.
For sure. And beyond the visuals, sources quoted Musk himself, suggesting he played a pretty big role in the election, saying things like, without me, Trump would have lost.
Right. And there were also mentions in the sources about financial support donations. The numbers varied quite a bit in the reports we saw.
Yeah, I saw figures like $250 million, maybe $288 million. One source even threw out billions. Hard to pin down the exact amount from the reports.
But the perception was clearly there. Significant support, one way or another.
Mm-hmm. So cooperation, symbols of friendship, Musk feeling like a key player.
Which makes this sudden implosion even more dramatic.
Yeah.
So what was the spark? What did the sources say actually lit the fuse for this public fight?
It really seems to center on that big piece of legislation, the one Trump and his allies were calling the Big Beautiful Bill.
Right. And Musk's take on X definitely wasn't calling it beautiful, was it? What did the sources capture there?
No, not at all. His language was incredibly sharp. Sources quoted him calling it a massive, outrageous, pork-filled congressional spending bill. A disgusting abomination. Really strong stuff.
Wow. Pork-filled, disgusting abomination.
Yeah.
He didn't mince words.
Not at all. He argued it would massively increase the deficit, adding something like $2.5 trillion, burdening people with crushingly unsustainable debt.
And he didn't just criticize the bill, right? He went after the politicians.
Yeah, he called for people to fire all politicians who betrayed the American people, said he just couldn't stand it anymore. Real anger there.
Okay, so that's Musk's very clear, very negative take.
Yeah.
How did Trump and his team defend the bill against that, based on the reports?
Well, Trump's defense was equally forceful, just, in the opposite direction. He called the bill incredible, claimed it was the biggest cut in the history of our country.
Biggest cut ever. Did the sources back that up?
He cited a figure, $1.6 trillion in cuts, but yeah, other sources immediately noted that number was, let's say, highly disputed.
Okay, so what was his rationale then, if not the biggest cut?
The argument presented was more about pragmatism, that given the really narrow majorities in Congress, this was a significant achievement. It kept the 2017 tax cuts going, made some cuts to future spending growth. It was framed as working within political reality.
So two totally different reads. Musk, abomination, adds debt. Trump, incredible, huge cuts, best possible deal.
Got it.
What about the Democrats? The sources must have covered their reaction too.
Oh, yeah. They weren't happy either, but for different reasons than Musk. Hakeem Jeffries reportedly called it one big ugly bill that would hurt the American people, and interestingly also said it would explode the debt.
So agreeing with Musk on the debt point, but from a different angle.
Kinda, and Chuck Schumer was quoted saying something like, there's nothing beautiful about stripping away people's health care.
Healthcare, okay.
Yeah.
Did the sources detail those Democratic concerns?
They did. Reports mention worries about healthcare cuts, like potential Medicaid work requirements, making people prove they're working to get coverage, and reduced federal payments, potentially leading to people losing access.
Well,
Also concerns that the tax cuts mostly benefited the wealthy. They cited the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, which is nonpartisan, estimating the bill could add $2.3 trillion to the deficit over 10 years.
so close to Musk's $2.5 trillion estimate, actually.
Yeah, in same ballpark, deficit-wise. Democrats also raised flags about cuts to programs like SNAP food assistance and restrictions on reproductive or LGBTQ plus healthcare possibly being tucked in there. These were all framed as the Democratic critiques in the source material.
Okay, so it's complex. Musk hates it for not cutting enough and adding debt. Democrats hate it for cutting social programs, helping the rich, and also adding debt. And Trump defends it as a pragmatic win. Really highlights different philosophies, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And the sources really tried to unpack that. They painted Musk's view as, coming from his business background, like hyper-focused on efficiency, deep spending cuts, almost trying to run government like a company, maybe like Steve Jobs cutting staff, that kind of analogy was used, running up against bureaucracy.
Right, efficiency above all.
Whereas Trump's position was presented as much more political, working with the tight margins he had, focusing on tax cuts, border funding, things he could realistically get done, even if it meant compromises on spending. Sources noted he hadn't really run on fundamentally changing big programs like Medicare or Social Security, which you'd need for massive debt reduction.
So a clash between maybe idealism or business thinking versus political pragmatism.
That's how some commentators framed it, yeah. Some sympathized with Musk's focus on the debt, but they also acknowledged the political tightrope Trump was walking.
Okay, so the big, beautiful bill fight was the spark. But the sources strongly suggested there was more to it, that Musk's business interests were a big factor in his opposition.
That was definitely a major narrative pushed by Trump and picked up by some commentators, yes. The argument being that Musk's fierce opposition wasn't just ideology, but also about his bottom line.
And specifically, it was about electric vehicles, right?
Yeah.
EVs.
That's the core of it, according to those reports. The bill apparently included measures to remove EV mandates and subsidies that had been put in place before under Biden.
And Trump directly accused Musk of basically being fine with the bill until he realized those EV provisions were gone.
He did. The sources quoted Trump saying things like, Musk knew the inner workings of this bill better than almost anybody and had no problem with it initially. Then Trump stated very explicitly, Elon's upset because we took the EV mandate. That was Trump's explanation for Musk's sudden turnaround.
Pretty direct accusation. How did Musk hit back at that? Did he address the EV mandate issue?
He did, on X, naturally. He flatly denied Trump's claim, posting false. This bill was never shown to me, even once, and claimed it was passed too quickly for anyone to read.
Okay, so direct denial.
But then he posted something else later that was maybe a bit more revealing. He said something like, whatever, keep the EV solar incentive cuts, even though no oil and gas subsidies are touched. Very unfair, but ditch the mountain of disgusting pork.
So, still angry about the overall bill, but that comment really highlights the EV cuts and the perceived unfairness compared to oil and gas, doesn't it?
It certainly seems to underscore that the EV issue was a significant point of contention for him, yeah. Even while maintaining his broader critique.
And this public back and forth, these accusations, they had a pretty immediate effect on the market, didn't they?
Oh, absolutely. A massive effect. The sources were clear on this. Tesla's stock price just tanked. Dropped, 14% in a single day.
14%. That's huge for a company that size.
Huge. Analysts in the reports linked it directly to this feud. We're talking about $150 billion in market value, just gone, wiped out. One source even calculated Musk's personal paper loss from that day at around $34 billion.
Good grief. $150 billion market cap drop tied to a Twitter spat.
Right.
Essentially. That really puts the stakes in perspective.
Definitely.
And Trump didn't just accuse Musk about motives, he actually threatened his other businesses too.
He did. He really escalated things there. Sources quoted him making a direct threat. The easiest way to save money, billions and billions, is to terminate Elon's governmental subsidies and contracts.
Wow. Targeting SpaceX.
That's the implication, yeah. SpaceX has enormous government contracts, reportedly around $20 billion. And as the sources pointed out, SpaceX is basically the only way the U.S. sends astronauts and cargo to the space station right now.
So a very serious threat, leveraging that dependency.
Extremely serious. One source even noted Biden hadn't cut those contracts because, well, SpaceX is kind of the only game out there for certain launches.
How did Musk react to that threat, the contract termination idea?
Sources mentioned some fiery initial reactions. There were reports he threatened to dismantle my rockets or decommission his Dragon spacecraft, pulling his toys out of the game.
Seriously, dismantle rockets.
That was the report, though apparently he walked that specific threat back later, saying he wouldn't decommission the Dragon. But he also fired another shot on X, suggesting Trump's tariffs would cause a recession later this year.
Okay, so it goes from policy to business interests to direct threats against companies.
Yeah.
And then it got personal too, right? The sources described it moving beyond just policy.
Oh, definitely. It shifted into a really personal conflict, framed as a high-stakes breakup, an all-out brawl. Sources pointed to big egos on both sides, neither known for taking insults lying down.
Was there a specific personal slight mentioned, something beyond the bill that might have poisoned the well?
Some sources floated a theory, that maybe it wasn't just the bill. They pointed to what happened with Jared Isaacman's nomination for NASA administrator.
Isaac Garman.
Yeah.
He's the private astronaut guy.
And a friend of Musk's.
Exactly. Musk apparently recommended him, seen as knowledgeable, but his nomination was withdrawn. Sources speculated this might have been a deliberate tactical mistake, a way to kind of needle Elon or slap Elon after he left the DOGE role. And the official reason given for withdrawing the nomination didn't quite add up.
Well, the reason given was past Democratic donations, but sources questioned that, suggesting it could have been known earlier. So it fueled speculation that it was more personal.
Okay, so maybe some underlying personal tension already brewing, and then the insults started flying directly.
Yep. Trump was quoted saying things like, Elon's totally lost it, suggesting he had Trump derangement syndrome, basically implying Musk turned hostile after leaving the administration once the glamour is gone.
And Musk shot back on the election claim again.
He did, that X post. Without me, Trump would have lost the election. Such ingratitude. Hitting Trump right where it hurts, suggesting he owed his win to Musk and was now being ungrateful.
But the real bombshell, the comment that got the most attention, that was the Epstein Files accusation, wasn't it?
That was the one. Sources highlighted that post where Musk just dropped it. Time to drop the really big bomb. Donald Trump is in the Epstein Files. That is the real reason they have not been made public. Have a nice day, DJT.
Wow. And the sources were careful about how they reported that claim.
Extremely careful. They stressed it was made without evidence. News outlets like CNN reportedly said they cannot confirm it. And significantly, they noted Trump, who usually responds to everything, apparently hasn't directly addressed that specific accusation.
So a claim made with no proof offered and no public response from Trump on that specific point.
Correct. Sources called it the lowest of the low insult in that political sphere, and some commentators saw it as the real tipping point, the moment that maybe made the relationship truly irreparable.
With things getting that nasty, did anyone try to step in? Any behind-the-scenes efforts to calm things down mentioned?
Yeah, sources did report that allies of both men were trying, quietly attempting to broker peace, make them see the damage. But apparently those efforts kept getting blown up by the ongoing public attacks, especially after that Epstein tweet. It just made any reconciliation attempts impossible at the time.
So while these two titans are clashing, how's everyone else reacting? What did the sources say?
Well, predictable reactions in some corners. Democrats were reportedly giddy, having a field day, watching the infighting.
I can imagine. And the media. Late-night comics.
They were delighted, according to reports. Lots of material for jokes, obviously.
Sure. What about Republicans on Capitol Hill? Were they siding with Musk against the bill?
Actually, no. Sources said they mostly rallied around Trump in the bill. Some even thought Musk's attacks might actually help pass it by uniting Republicans against him.
Interesting. A sort of rally around the flag effect. And the commentators, looking at the bigger picture.
Mixed views. Some called the whole thing embarrassing and damaging for the nation, potentially making the U.S. look weak globally. Lots of Battle of the Titans framing.
And predictions about where it goes from here. Can they patch things up?
Split opinions there, too. Some thought maybe it blows over Trump's known to be transactional. Musk might need those government contracts down the line, especially SpaceX. But others felt the damage was too deep, calling the relationship fractured beyond repair or irreparable.
Though someone disputed irreparable.
Yeah, one source made a point of saying, nothing is irreparable with Donald Trump. So, who knows? Others used it to talk about the bigger issue, politicians always kicking the debt can down the road, avoiding tough choices, which fuels both Trump's pragmatism and Musk's frustration.
Did the sources mention any more colorful reactions from the community? Specific people weighing in?
They did. Bill Ackman, the investor sometimes called David Eckman in one source, maybe a typo, reportedly called for peace for the benefit of our country. Musk apparently replied, "You're not wrong."
Acknowledging the damage, maybe.
Seems like it. Kanye West also reportedly pleaded, "Bros, please no, we love you both so much." And then you had the usual online stuff, satire from the Babylon Bee, people calling Musk Muskrat, the internet gets.
Right. So entertaining for some, maybe concerning for others, but the sources make it clear this isn't just noise, it has real consequences.
Absolutely. We talked about the huge market impact on Tesla, potential impacts on SpaceX, a critical national asset. It definitely shifts the political landscape, affects how people see both men. And that point about potentially looking weak internationally, that's serious.
Okay, so wrapping this up,
Yeah.
this deep dive really shows it wasn't just one thing, right? It's like a perfect storm.
Exactly. It starts with a fundamental policy clash, spending, debt, the role of government. Then it gets tangled up with massive business interests, specifically those EV incentives. And finally, it spirals into this really personal battle. Egos, perceived insults, those incredibly inflammatory accusations.
Yeah.
It's all in there.
And it matters to you, the listener, because
Oh, for one, the potential effects on markets, maybe even the national debt that impacts everyone's finances eventually. But beyond that, it's just a fascinating, maybe slightly terrifying window into how power works today. The intersection of billionaire influence, politics, personality, all playing out in real time, very publicly.
it really is. Leaves you wondering, given how incredibly personal this got, how deep the business conflicts run, can that bridge ever really be rebuilt between them? And maybe more importantly, what does this whole episode tell us about how much power figures like Musk will wield in politics going forward? Definitely something to chew on.